very specialist and not suitable for the mainstream stores at that moment in time. Then a couple of things happened. In the, I think it was the first time it happened, was actually in 1997. There was the major food scare of mad cow disease. And you'll say, well, what on earth has that got to do with green and blacks? A couple of things. Firstly, I guess it took the whole debate about where is my food from? How is it grown? Is it being, what's happening back down the food chain? From being really something that was written about in the food issues column on page 79 of a serious newspaper or trade journal, to being front page news, front page television news. People were all of a sudden really thinking about the food that they ate. And at the same time, there was a debate raging about GM foods. So it went from minority interest to the mainstream. And I know this from an unfortunate experience of being on the wrong side of it, because whilst all this was breaking out, I was running the marketing for Burger King in the UK, which was not where you wanted to be when mad cow disease broke. So I presided over a wonderful sales collapse and a switch from everybody moving from Whoppers to the Chicken Royale. It was quite fascinating how it happened, but it did come back well after. But actually, I guess what I could see there, working for a big corporate, big mainstream, arguably lower end of the food market, was just how these issues were all of a sudden going to be quite a big deal moving forward. And the book Fast Food Nation, if any of you have read that, which was a big expose on the fast food industry, came out. And all of a sudden, Tesco, Sainsbury, all the big UK supermarkets thought, well, all of our customers are reading about these things, what do we do? And they came under a bit of pressure to start to be more supportive of organic foods brands. So Green and Blacks had that wonderful moment where actually the Tesco buyer would phone up and say, I've heard about your chocolate, I've seen you in Holland & Barrett, would you mind actually supplying us? It'd be awfully nice if you could send us your biggest selling lines. Quite different to the negotiations we have with them today, but it was that rare moment where we actually were able to find our feet in more established channels, but off the back of being organic. So in many ways, whilst organic in some cases had limited the appeal of the brand up until that time, it was actually the thing that drew people's attention to Green and Blacks and gave us a ticket into the bigger time. Those of you who remember the early days of organic foods and fair trade foods in supermarkets, they used to be put generally in the last food aisle you got to before you got to the booze section, so almost the end of food, but before it turned into kind of long life dried goods, the not so nice areas. And it was a dedicated aisle for organic and ethical. So our wonderful chocolate was there next to, organic pasta sauces, brown rice, lentils, much of which at the time was not particularly good quality. And the whole organic movement was held back because of some of the quality of products being sold at the time. And if we talked to Green and Blacks customers, you'd say, why do you buy Green and Blacks? And they'd say, well, I bought it because it was organic and I wanted to try it and I believe that organic's important. And you say, well, why do you buy it now? And they say, well, I buy it now, it's obvious, because it tastes so good. So actually organic got them in and taste brought them back, and that's still very much the marketing approach that we've applied. I joined the business as part of a management team who came in and refinanced the company in 2000, and I joined it a few months after that. And one of the first things I wanted to do was to do some consumer research. And I have to say, we're not huge believers in consumer research at Green and Blacks. We don't get caught up in process. We try and let our intuition rule. But I really thought that we needed to make some quite big changes to the brand and that it was important to check that out before doing it. And at the time, to give you a feel, we were about a 2.5–3 million turnover company, still mainly sold in specialist outlets with a few sales in the supermarkets. So we went and did some research groups, and we did them in London and we did some in Brighton. And I remember travelling down to Brighton, and those of you who've been in focus groups, the two worst things to do in focus groups are alcohol, because everybody just gets tucked in and stops listening to any of the questions, or chocolate. And it was quite amazing. And basically, we'd recruited people for these focus groups. We'd recruited ladies who said they had an interest in quality chocolate, and that may have been Marks & Spencer chocolate, Thornton's chocolate, Lindt chocolate, those type of brands, so-called premium chocolate brands. And we asked them what they thought about all these different brands, and they had the chance to eat all of the chocolates on the centre of the table. And after an hour and 20-minute focus group, it happened twice. All of the chocolate on the table had been opened and tried, apart from Green and Blacks, which was slightly disturbing when you're running Green and Blacks and paying for the focus groups. And I remember going up to one of the ladies at the end and saying, actually, the reason you're here tonight is because we work for Green and Blacks. We're a little company, but we'd really like you to tell us what you think of our chocolate. And I'm slightly worried that you haven't even, although it's free, you haven't even opened it. So, is there a reason for that? And she said to me, well, I've not really heard of it, and organic, I'm not sure about that. That means you've taken something out, because how can chocolate be healthy? Didn't realise that actually organic meant that we just used, clean ingredients that hadn't been sprayed with chemicals. And she also said, and to be honest, your packaging, all this fair trade thing and organic and talking about the cocoa growers, it's kind of interesting, but she said, when I have chocolate, it's like a selfish thing, and I don't want to risk my chocolate credits on you because I'm not sure you're going to be any good. So I'm just it's like being kind of punched in the ring and taking all this feedback. And then just when I thought she'd finished, she said, and you know what as well? She said, your chocolate, she said, actually, I'll tell you what it is. She said, it looks like charity chocolate. And it's like, crikey, what have I done? Left a sensible job with a big company to go and join this weirdo organic foods company. And I said, well, actually, to be honest with you, I said, I understand what you're saying, because I agree with you, actually. I think it does look a bit worthy, but believe you me, it tastes great. Promise, try it. And she agreed to try it. And that evening, I think we saw the reaction that hopefully some of you who haven't tried Green and Blacks will experience later, where it's a discernibly different chocolate. It's actually not to everybody's liking, because it's quite bitter, it's quite strong, it's quite challenging. But it is a different type of chocolate to the mainstream, and we think it's much better. And no sooner than this lady tried it, and she said, "Cry, you're right. I'm really shocked. It actually does taste good." And she turned around and started introducing it to all of her compatriots in the focus group. And I, having sat through years of focus groups on the various brands I've worked on, never left a focus group so convinced and so clear about what we needed to do, which was we had a problem with our packaging. It looked too worthy and too ethical, if that was possible. Didn't look indulgent enough, because the basic thing about chocolate is people buy it for taste and quality. And also, the way to get people into Green and Blacks was to tell them the story and give them the chance to try the chocolate. So we've had many plaudits for what we've done since, but as I always say to people, we invested in what I think is a fantastic smart pack design that we're all very proud of, and we give away lots of chocolate, and that's really the marketing science behind Green and Blacks. But we try and keep it simple and do it with a bit of style, but that actually is the heart of the marketing idea. So we moved from those worthy ethical ideas to a look and feel that was more akin to what people expect from chocolate, more luxurious, more of a treat. And actually we thought organic doesn't have to be this kind of save the planet ethical. It can be quite cool. So the whole kind of idea of eco-chic and premium green, as we now call it, green is the new black. Organic can actually be very positive and trendy. It doesn't have to be deadly serious. So we moved to this packaging, which we've now had in the market for more than 5 years, and just looks much more stylish, much simpler, arguably, fewer messages on it, but I think it smacks first and foremost of quality. But as you see, organic is still right in the heart of the pack and remains important to us. I remember joining the business, and one of the things I think that whatever business or brand that you're involved with, that you have to do is be really, really clear about who you're targeting. Everybody thinks they do that, but very few people really ask the hard questions about who they're targeting. And I remember when I joined, the lady that was our brand manager at the time, she said to me, well, I hear what you're saying, but why do we need to change anything? Because we're the number one. We've got 96% market share. And I said, well, that's interesting, Clooney, but 96% share of what? And she said, well, of organic chocolate. But of course, the organic chocolate market was a non-event at the time. And I remember printing out a poster and sticking it in our kitchen, which also doubled up as our boardroom at the time, saying that today we go from 95% market share to under 1%, and we were actually well under 1%. And it changed the mentality, because we had some fantastic people working with us, but they were so into organic foods, they thought that everybody else in the country had the same level of interest as they did. Whereas most of us, I suspect in this room, are more interested in, does the chocolate taste any good? And bonus, if it can be organic as well, that's fantastic. But, I'm not going to eat this chocolate just because it's organic. It has to taste good first and foremost. So we went from being this kind of market leader in organic chocolate, a niche of a niche, arguably, to being the little guy in the big chocolate market. And we used organic as our point of difference to become a challenger brand and take on the big established brands by saying we not only taste great, but, we're also organic, and we're on a mission to give you great quality chocolate, but grown in a responsible way. What are the, let's call them brand foundations, or what's in the DNA of the brand, things that will never change?